Okay, so here's a look at lesson 6 that was delivered in class on Tuesday, November 17th. In our opening, we find out that our learning target is I can integrate information from historical photographs to better understand excerpts of the Meriam Report. Then we took a closer look at a statement that was in the afterword yesterday. These schools were largely paramilitary institutions in which Native students were stripped of their native languages and cultural identities, drilled, dressed in uniforms, and separated from their families for years at a time. We were asked to identify the connotation of stripped of. Does that have a negative vibe, a neutral, meaning no feeling whatsoever, or a positive vibe? And we identified that stripped of is pretty negative. It shows that it's something that was forced, not voluntary, that it was kind of against their will. And he chose to use the word stripped of as opposed to something like given up, to communicate that he is not a fan of these boarding schools or the way they operated. Then we have our chalk talk, where we were to look at these images and make some observations and see if we can make any connections to what we read about in the Meriam Report yesterday. So each of these photos was taken by the same photographer, Francis Benjamin Johnston. They are all taken at the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania in the year 1901. So the first one here called Students in Dining Hall. And so some of the observations that were made is that there are a lot of students in this space, and that we can see uniforms and how students all seem to be sitting quite proper. Maybe they have aprons on to protect their clothes. Doesn't look like a whole lot of joy or laughter in this image. Then we have boys digging for potatoes. Some of the observations, again, we could see that they're in uniforms of some kind. They're wearing the same hats. There is a man in the background that seems to be in charge and looks like he's giving orders. These also look like pretty young boys, about your age. Then we've got class in English or penmanship. So some of the observations here, we observed oddly that the students sitting in the desks are facing away from the board, so not quite sure what that's about. But the students in desks all seem to be doing the same thing, and the students at the board all seem to be writing the same thing, but we're not quite sure why they're doing two different things. But again, it does not look like anyone is terribly engaged or happy about their learning. And the teacher just seems to be overseeing and not necessarily teaching. And the last one, we have cooking class. So some observations, we were looking at the fact that these are girls working, whereas the picture in the fields was boys working. It looks like maybe they're peeling potatoes. Again, wearing aprons, uniforms, all look very similar. We also then were kind of noticing the amount of food being prepared here compared to the number of students that we saw in that dining hall. And we thought that maybe that kind of lent itself to the idea of their diets being deficient in quantity. We might also say quality and variety if they are farming potatoes and then preparing potatoes. That's probably something that was done repeatedly. Okay, so then the next part of the lesson, everyone needed to make a copy of the assignment in work time B, integrate photos and Meriam Report. So you would click here to make a copy of the assignment that looks like this. There is a video that you can watch that walks you through the first one. So I'm going to ask you to do that. You are then going to go and complete this assignment. It is 4 pages long, but only because each of the 4 excerpts from the Meriam Report is given its own page. So you need to match up the photos to the excerpt and then explain what the photo is showing, as well as how it relates to the Meriam Report.